Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next comment question comes from David Dav1. Well, it's David Bone. Oh, it just doesn't register. Anyway, this was in response to Yamaha SY77 project completion, the restoration part 5 I did in January 2024. And David writes, wonder if you have any advice. Okay, here we go. I have a Korg 01W, it doesn't seem to power on. If I power the main 5 volt on the logic board with my bench power supply, grounds connected, I can get it to power on. However, I need to raise the voltage to 6.5 volts, wait a few seconds, and gradually turn the voltage down to 6.2 volts. All looks okay. My question is could this be a capacitor issue? Perhaps something on the board is pulling too much power. There were issues on the PCB with a leaking battery, which I mostly cleaned up. Ooh, another one. Anyway, first disclaimer. I don't own a Korg 01W, and I probably never will own a Korg 01W because I can't see it really being. It doesn't give me anything more than the Korg T1 gives me, and I bought the Korg T1 for a reason, because I love it. I thought it was such a great piece of furniture, and it really looks really smart now. I've done finished the restoration on that particular board and got rid of all the scabby end pieces that have been bashed and whatever during its life. Anyway, it now looks like a lovely piece of furniture, and it will look really smart when it goes back into the studio eventually. Anyway, that aside, but I did look at my very poor scan of the Korg T1 service manual, and I believe, and so maybe someone will correct me, and I can't find an 01W service manual, by the way. But I believe that the operating voltages are very, very similar between the two. And at the point in time when I wrote this, I did say it looks like it's +6, +12, -12, and ground. Now, I am going to put a disclaimer on here because I have now got hold of a printed copy of the service manual. And its reproduction is poor. And even on the printed version, I am struggling to work out whether it's a +6 or +5. Now, I'm actually going to say I think it is +5. Okay, having looked at this with a magnifying glass. And that sounds really daft, but honestly, it is so poorly printed. So poorly printed. I can't believe Korg issued something like that was that poorly printed. Anyway, so at the point in time I was sort of saying, well, based on this evidence, I kind of wondered whether, the voltage ranges that you suggest and the fact that you're seeing 4.98 volts on one rail, you might not be getting enough output for some function. And that would have, your bench test saying you have to go up to 6.2 volts kind of supports the fact it is 6 volts, but as I say, I'm not so sure that that's what it says in the printed manual anymore. So that was the hypothesis I was working on when I was responding. And what I would do here is I start tracking back through the specific rail circuitry to see where the voltage is being lost. And it could be a capacitor leaking voltage and acting as a resistor. It could also be another component within the circuitry. But that's probably how I would start to tackle this. David then writes back and says, thanks for your help. Interesting, the schematic on the T1 shows 6 volts. Well, I've just covered that. There is a 7 805 on the PSU. If I go beyond 5.8 volts, the screen starts to darken. Yeah, it's probably something to do with your over voltage in it. I'll try systematically replacing the caps. If no joy, then I have an idea to try something else. There will still be some corrosion of ball affecting buttons, going to tidy this up as well. So I then wrote back to him and said, I'm sorry, I think I got the voltage wrong. I think it is 5, not 6, but it's very, very hard to say. And we kind of left it at that. So maybe David would write back and say where he's got to. Next one comes from David Sharp in response to the Roland MX-1 USB ports explained, a video I did in January 2019. And David writes, "Hi, tech guy, thanks for the video." Well, you're very welcome. Do you know if it's possible to separate the outputs from the Roland TR8S into separate channels on the MX-1 while connected via USB? Example, TR8S to MX1 via USB, the kick drum to channel 1 on the MX1, remaining channels TRS to channel 2, MX1, etc, etc. Thank you. Well, there is a very short answer to this, and the short answer is no. Okay, and the reason for that is how the MX1 is constructed. The Roland MX-1 is not designed to route signals in the way that way, and now, you know, that the mixer has been discontinued, I doubt if we'll get any firmware updated to do that, to include the functionality. The MX-1, the mixer on the MX-1 basically dealt with the master outs on the instrument that was connected to it. So if you had a left and a right out and you brought that in onto USB 1, for argument's sake, you would have a stereo mix of what was coming off the TR8S. You can't route the outputs on the TR8S to individual mixer outputs on the MX-1. It just doesn't work like that. If you want to do that, what you have to do is you have to route that to the computer, and then you basically put it into your DAW and a surface and use it that way. You effectively are routing the individual channels off the TR8S to the DAW and the surface, and you would do it that way. But you can't do it on the MX-1. The MX-1 was never designed. Remember, the MX-1 was designed as kind of this kludge, DAW-less mixing scenario. So you could take your ARIA gear on the road without a DAW and basically mix it up and jam. That's what it was. It's very confused in terms of all the outputs and inputs that the MX-1 has and how it works. But in essence, you've always got to go back to what was this thing meant to. It was DAW-less jamming on the fly. Anyway, I hope that helps.